listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
You magnificent bastard, I read your book. I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain.
No, not yet. Don't pass out on me yet. Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Today is Tuesday. It is June 16th, the year of our Lord 2020. Great show for you tonight. 2 full hours worth of buttery goodness, and I'm glad you're here. I love this song. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk, Bobcat, Saloon Radio Show, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled with a K, a mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where, late at night, you can hear the death of common sense and its concomitant wail as it wafts from that petrifying edifice. And late at night, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, palatial, and effulgently bulbous SHR Media studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from that mentally destitute columned structure aforementioned. What you are about to hear for the next 2 hours consists of my opinion and no one else's. Because of the fear porn that has gripped this nation, the saloon is no longer open in the front, as the city of Sacramento has pulled my license, but I am still serving stiff drinks, facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the back door. And we don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation, politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all right here at the saloon where the speech is free, but the booze is not. In 2020, I am done with compromise and bipartisanship. This is the new age of modern political warfare. The leftists, Democrats, and American media maggots all want you dead, or at minimum, jobless, bankrupt, bereft of a future, and quivering in the fetal position under your desk, waiting for your local leftist governors and mayors to bestow a modicum of freedom in dribs and drabs when it pleases them, always to be taken away also when it pleases them, or when you have the temerity to push back or reoffend. If our Constitution and Bill of Rights don't prevail, we have absolutely lost this nation, and it won't be coming back, because if we lose freedom here in the United States of America, where else are we going to find it around the planet? So tonight in the saloon, in the first hour, I have DUANE Patterson, producer of the Hugh Hewitt Radio Show. In the second hour, what CHAZ, CHOP, whatever the hell they're calling themselves today, could really mean. Is it the beginning of some kind of hate and discontent? Is there war in the offing? Is there violence? We'll talk about that in the second hour. Let's go right to it. Tonight, I got to tell you this. In chat. God, I haven't turned on Facebook yet. Okay, in chat, holy mother of God, look at the people in chat. I've got the Silmarillion, Jack Alexander, the Alaskan Traveling Cynic, Major Bob 37, Leslie Holker, Severe Cruz, and one viewer who will not be... I don't unmask people here. You unmask yourselves. I am not the federal government. I don't do that. In any event, got a great guest tonight, and someone that I've wanted to have on for quite some time. We will be speaking to DUANE Patterson, who is producer of the Hugh Hewitt Radio Show. DUANE is otherwise known as a radio blogger or Generalissimo. No, say that again, BZ. Generalissimo. Okay, thank you. And I hope to find out why tonight. I first met DUANE at an event called the Tribble Fest at the Anaheim Disneyland in 2015, where Hugh Hewitt customarily conducts a yearly visit and features DUANE Patterson writing around endlessly on, well, we'll find out about that too. So I became a Tribble. That means I'm a listener to the Hugh Hewitt Show, and that's Hugh's name for his legion of fans. And we would listen to the show live during Hugh's PM broadcast from Southern California, and then engage either Hugh or DUANE in the chat room. Ton of great fun and a great bunch of people in the chat room. DUANE became a personality himself, as well he should be, to the point where he created what is known as the Hugh Hewitt After Show, and he'd talk about the issues that Hugh either failed to address or extend various conversations. So to say that DUANE Patterson is a great guy is an understatement. He's also a survivor, like me, of cancer. Plus, it's no surprise that I love radio, having worked for KFBK and a bunch of other radio stations in the early 70s in Ohio and California. So I'm prepping you guys up front. Some of this stuff is going to be like inside baseball, only it's going to be inside radio because that's just what I really enjoy. So let's welcome DUANE Patterson into the saloon. Good evening, Sir DUANE, and thanks very kindly for being here tonight.
My pleasure. It's time for a break now, right? I think you need to spend a little bit more time, Jeff, on the intro, because I don't think there's enough jammed into that intro. I think you need to work just a little bit more on it.
I could have said something similar to, and now, the show. Okay. The truth is, late last year, I actually learned Audacity. I'm pushing 70. I actually went out and learned Audacity, and that's right. Audacious prowess that I'm attempting to display. So you're right. I should probably cut a lot of that crap back, and I will. I really will someday. Honest to God. I never have enough time. I'll admit it up front, to get into everything that I want to talk about with folks. But with first-time folks like yourself, I usually try to start at the start. So, okay, and I forewarned the Tribbles that I'm probably going to ask questions that they already know the answers to, but I don't. So it's my show. I get to ask the damn questions, okay? I'm sorry. That's how it works. God, look at all the people that I got in chat. This is great. So thanks for, apparently you announced this in the after show, so thanks for doing that, DUANE.
I may have been responsible for some of that. I told people that you were going to be, you had scraped the bottom of the barrel and were running out of other people to talk to, and came to me, and so I figured, well, I needed support, so I maybe got a Tribble or two to come over.
Right, and that check that I sent you for $5 really worked. So I also really appreciate that. DUANE Patterson, where were you born? You're in Southern California, but were you born and raised there?
Yes. I have never lived more than probably 25 miles of where I was born. Orange County, Central Orange County, kind of within eyesight of Anaheim Stadium and Disneyland. Anaheim's a little bit to my north, but the one thing about this part of the country is, well, this part of the state is, even though there is no governance here to speak of, we have everything both in the way of air and temperature, climate. You're within an hour drive of either the ocean, a third world country, the mountains, the desert, the Central Valley, wine country. You're within an hour drive or an hour and a half drive of virtually any kind of recreation you could possibly want to do. And the climate, you don't unlike virtually everywhere else in the country, where people have to actually listen to the weather report every day, because if they don't, they could get caught in the cold or in the something and die. Where we are at, as you well know, 330 days a year, you just don't care, because you know you're going to walk outside and it's going to be 80 degrees and partly sunny. It's just the weather. It's the finest climate on earth, and that's really the only thing that this place has going for it. Because if it is taxes or governance or regulations or anything else, it's just a total loss. It's just a total excrement show.
And if you want to, you can say various poo-poo nasties. I do it all the time. If you don't wish to, oh well. When you were a young prat, did you have any kind of an idea what it is that you wanted to be when you grew up? I mean, obviously you're in radio. We're going to get to the whole radio thingy in a bit, because radio fascinates the hell out of me, I got to admit. But was there some kind of a person or a job or whatever it is that you wanted to be when you were young, and you had the luxury of recognizing it early?
I was probably 11 or 12, 13, somewhere in that range. I always adored radio. I would listen to radio at night. I would fantasize about wanting to get into being a disc jockey and doing that kind of thing. I listened to KMEP when I was young. I listened to KLOS. Basin. The mighty KMEP. Dr. Demento on Sunday nights was a staple.
Yep. Oh, Duane.
They were craftsmen, right? They
Wherever you are, Duane, you are dropping out. I know you said your cell site was not all that fabulous. But I don't know, maybe if you could extend your right hand genuflect toward Mecca or something like that, and
how about now?
We can get you back. There you go.
Better now?
There you go. Much better. Yes, sir.
Okay. So KMEP, KLOS. I was listening to a lot of LA radio. Dr. Demento on Sunday nights. I used to in my junior high days, I would listen to Casey Kasem do the weekly top 40, that kind of thing. I appreciated the craft of radio, right? Always did. I never really dreamed I would get into it. I thought it would be cool to do, but I never really pursued it, never really had any much to do with it. In high school, as it turns out, the reason I got into radio, and we'll get to this if we're going to get into the whole story, everything I ended up doing in life, totally unbeknownst to me as I was doing it, led me to doing what I'm doing now. It was all divine providence. I'm doing what I was supposed to be doing through no fault of my own. I just kept doing things that kind of led me to this chapter. In high school, I was a teacher's aide as a freshman, which you don't normally get to do, but I was able to pull some strings. And so I was the audiovisual geek. I was the AV nerd in high school. Right. I'm the one that made sure I had to go get all the movie projectors to the right classrooms, or the overhead projectors, or just the electronics that nobody wanted to deal with. My job was to make sure that it got everywhere it needed to go, right? And by the time I was the trusted AV aide, I had a master key to the school on my key ring by the time I was a sophomore. And of course they didn't know I did, but I learned how to scam and get what I needed, right? By the time I was a junior in driving, this was back in 82, and in 82, there were such a things as video cameras, but they were kind of expensive and they were big and clunky, right? And our drama department was going to have a play and wanted to record it, and our
oh darn, drop out again. And let's look and see if you hung up. No, you have not hung up. We just can't hear you. Okay, if you can hear me, maybe you could...
Am I back?
Oh, now you're back. Yep.
Okay, I'm back.
All right, cool.
So, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So my assistant principal, I asked him to call this at her high school and get this video camera, and so that they could record the school play. And he didn't want to do it. He says, "I'm not going to do that. We don't need to. Just tell him no." So I said, "Okay, great." And I hopped in my car at recess and went up to their school and talked to their principal and said, "Hey, can we borrow your camera?" "Oh yeah, sure." So they floated me the camera and went back, and I was a total hero to the drama department, and we recorded what we needed to record. And the assistant principal was really not happy with me, because the assistant principal, I completely went around, but I made sure the drama department thanked the assistant principal during the performance for everything he did to make this recording happen. And he couldn't exactly suspend me. He couldn't exactly give me a hard time, because I gave him all sorts of props and made sure he got all sorts of props. But, I learned all sorts of ways to scam and do that kind of stuff. And I was around all this gear and had no reason to know why I needed to be all around this gear or what I was going to do with it. But that was one little chapter of my life. So then, I get out of high school and I'm kind of meandering around, go to junior college and learn some business classes and, start to grow up. And as I'm doing college, I have a second job at a compact disc store. Back when we were actually, getting compact discs, it's like mid-80s now, right? And so compact discs were the big thing for me. I was starting to move all my stuff from records to CDs.
Yep, me
and
too.
It became a real habit for me. So I worked at this CD store to help pay for my music habit, right? And in the process of doing all of that, I learned a lot about rock and a lot about country and jazz and all these different genres of stuff that I hadn't heard before, just working at this music store. And so I picked up a lot of stuff that, I knew I liked, but at least had a working knowledge of a lot of different forms of music, just having to deal with selling it and interacting with the public. And one of the editor employees down there that was a part-timer like me, he and I ended up pooling our resources and getting a bunch of gear together, and we decided to help pay for our music habit. We would become mobile DJs, and we would DJ wedding receptions and that kind of stuff.
Oh, very cool.
Thought, okay, well, this is cool. And it wasn't radio, but I'm thinking, well, I can ham it up and I can do this. And, we got pretty good at it. We got pretty good at it over time. We did it for a few years. And so that was another chapter of my life that was completely unrelated to anything. But now my main day job is, at the time, I was working for a property management company. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get into real estate and all this kind of stuff. And it ended up panning out. I didn't really like it much. And I ended up retreating back to a fallback that I could have done from day one, which is my dad and my granddad, and my uncle for that matter, had a retail jewelry store, just a little mom and pop jewelry store in Tustin called Patterson Jewelers. And I finally said, okay, it's time. And they brought me in, and I would sit in the back room and I would do all the bench repair. I'd size people's rings up and down, or solder chains back together that grandkids broke, and just all the little bitsy stuff. A pearl falls off a ring, and you re-glue the pearl back on. That kind of stuff. I would do all the repair, and I'm thinking, okay, so this is what I'm going to do with my life. And so I was doing that for a good 7-8 years. I was now married. I had a kid. And this was now into 94 and 95 when my world kind of really changed. And it got to, Bill Clinton got elected in 92, also
right.
known as the locust years.
Right.
And as soon as Bill Clinton got elected, I knew I didn't like them, and I didn't quite know why, but I was just damn determined to figure out why. And back in those days, your computer, if you had a really good computer, it was like a 40 meg hard drive, right? You know, now 40 meg is one audio file. It's
yes.
But you know, if you had a 40 meg computer, that was rocking, right? And you had a if you were really cool, you had a 56K dial-up modem, right? And so this was back in the days of Prodigy and CompuServe and AOL and all their little online chat rooms and communities, right? So I was hanging out in those kind of things in my spare time at night. And I was doing some fishing and searching around, and I got into the whitewater stuff, and I knew there's all the stuff about the hillbilly mafia that the Clintons were involved in, and all the shady stuff that Hillary had done with the Rose Law Firm, and I just ate all that stuff up because you just knew these people were crooked, and you started reading more about it and researching more about it. And sure, some of it was conspiratorial, and some of it panned out to be true, and some of it, a lot of it didn't. But at the time, you just knew these people were crooked. You just knew these people were crooked. So that was kind of a hobby of mine, weird, twisted hobby. I hadn't cared about politics up to then. The only reason I kind of did now was because I had a kid, and when you get married and you have and you start to have kids, if you have a brain cell in your head, you start looking around and you want to know what kind of world you're going to leave your kid, right? Or what kind of world your kid's going to grow up. So you start taking a more active interest in what's going on. And that's kind of what I was doing. So there was a Arkansas creature named Larry Nichols. And Larry Nichols was one of the first guys that was kind of a low-level, disgruntled employee in Arkansas politics. And he was one of the first guys that was starting to make the radio rounds saying, Bill Clinton is a son of a bitch, and I'll tell you why. And he would tell you the most extreme things that some of the stuff that Bill Clinton did, who he flew around with, and all this other stuff, and what he used the state troopers for. And I'm thinking, oh, man, this guy's crooked. And I was in the jewelry store. This is 94, mid-94. I'm in the jewelry store. I got my jeans on. I've got my I dress like I do at the office now, basically. But I'm sitting at the bench. I'm working on somebody's ring, and hanging on the wall to my left, I've got this little ghetto blaster on really low, so I can hear radio all day long. Because you're sitting there with no customers out front, and you're just sitting there in the back. I just have the radio going on every day, and so I'm listening to. Listen to Rush in the morning. You'll listen to, who was on? George Putnam was on L.A. radio for a couple hours in the middle of the day, and he was an old cranky coot, but he would let all sorts of people talk about any number of things. Sometimes at night, I listened to a guy named Ray Bream on KBC. I mean, all these old legendary voices of radio. And again, I didn't think much of it. And then I heard this guy was going to have on this Larry Nichols guy. And I turned over to FM, 99.5 FM. And this was a Christian station, but the host was trying to do a hybrid of a show between theology and politics, conservative politics. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. So I started listening to him. His name is Warren Duffy. And
right.
He said, oh, yeah, we're going to... You remember the name Warren? In fact, Duffy...
Yes, I do, yes.
But before he became a Christian, he used to be called Cousin Duffy, and he was a morning jock on KMET for a while. And he used to do... I mean, he was into all sorts of psychedelic stuff, and he finally got his life turned around. But he was very much part of that whole 60s, 70s drug culture. He did PR work for the Beach Boys on one of their reunion tours, and so he had dipped his whole toe in that part of the world as well. But now he's doing Christian radio, straight up Christian radio, with a political hybrid to it. And so he goes on the air one day and he says, I'm just not sure about that. I kind of learned how to do a Duffy accent a little bit. He goes, I don't know, but I'm going to have this guy on next week. His name is Larry Nichols, and gosh, I just don't know that much about him. And hopefully I'll be able to put this together. But maybe you and I can learn what this guy's all about, because, gosh, he's got so many things to say about the president that it's really alarming if true. And we've got to have a tone of discernment in how we listen to this guy. But I'm just listening to this going, the guy's just begging for help. And I've got all this research just I've done on my own. So I call a station and I say, hey, your host is sitting there just begging for help. And I said, I've got some stuff I can fax over to him if he wants. And so they put me in touch with his office, his production office. And I said, hey, you probably get calls from cranks all the time. They're listeners. But I said, I heard you've got this, Larry Nichols on. I've got some information on it. If you truly want some research and background, I'm happy to fax it over. And his secretary says, oh, yeah, I think you'd really like that. So she gives me the fax number. So I wait till my wife goes to bed that night, and it's about midnight. And I put together this, 20, 30-page fax of prep, not knowing I was doing prep. And I faxed over to his office. And he has this guy on the next day, and he does this interview, and it's a pretty provocative. It's a good interview. And I'm going home that night, and I get this call, and it's Duffy. And he says, I can't tell you what an answer to prayer this was. I said, well, I'm glad to help. He says, how much does it cost you to do this? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you've got these sources. He said, that's all this online stuff. I said, yes, this is online stuff. And he said, how much do you have to pay for that? And I said, I don't know, a couple $100 a month. It probably covers my phone charges and, my internet subscriptions, my Prodigy subscription, my CompuServe membership, that kind of stuff. He says, if I pay for all that, he says, would you do research for me and just do what you did and keep sending me stuff overnight? I said, sure. So I'm thinking, hey, what the hell, I get to kind of explore my hobby, basically getting paid for it. And my first nickname on air with that show was I was known as the Midnight Faxer, because every morning he'd come in and there'd be this computer generated packet of material that he would use for his prep the next day. And I did that for 7, 8 months probably. And so now we're into early part of February, March of 95, maybe April of 95, right? And I get this call, and it's Duffy, and he says he's on his way home. His studio, or where he was broadcasting out of, KKLA's headquarters, was in Glendale, kind of halfway up a dumpy old building in Glendale, and he lived in Huntington Beach, so he was making that commute every day. And he's on his way home one day, and he calls me this car phone. He says, "What would you say if I asked you to produce my show?" And I'd say, "You don't know what you're talking about, because I have no idea what I'm doing." I said, "I've never done this before. I'm not qualified." He says, "Well," he says, "you're qualified as soon as I teach you." And I'm thinking, "Oh crap! Let me think about it. I'll let you know." And so I get off the phone with him. And because what he wanted to do, he laid out what the parameter was, and what if I was any older or any more experienced, I would have told him to take a flying leap, because what he had signed on to do was do a nationally syndicated show for Salem's Christian network from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. Take 3 hours off, and then come back on in L.A. and do a 4 to 7 shift in L.A.
Holy crap!
So 5 hours. That's what the gig initially was that he signed up for, and I'm green, never done it before, and he wanted me to produce it. And so I'm thinking, I don't know. So I'm chewing it around. I'm mulling about it. And I was about ready to turn him down at the jewelry store. I was there the next day or two, and my dad says, so you're going to do this, right? And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. He says, you're an idiot if you don't. I said, why? And he says, you can always come back here if you need to. But he says, you do not want to be like me, going through the rest of your life, kicking yourself, not having a chance to do something you've always wanted to do. And I never even knew that much about my dad. I knew my dad quite well. I still do. He's I love my dad, and we have a great relationship. But at the time, I didn't know what he was referring to, because apparently when he was roughly my age, college age or just a little after, he had some opportunity in front of him that he could have done that he didn't do, and instead was the loyal son and stayed behind to help his dad launch the jewelry store. And he stayed at the jewelry store the whole time. And he always regretted not chasing whatever dream it was he had, and he never would tell me what that dream was. But he says, I don't want you to be like me and have regrets of not doing something you wanted to do. And so I had to try it. I had to try it. So I'm figuring, okay, I'm going to go do this. And 2 weeks later, they're going to figure out I don't know what the hell I'm doing. They'll fire me, and then I'd land back in the jewelry store, no harm, no foul, right? So the first day, I show up to his office. This was May 15th, 1995, my first day in radio. And I walk in with blue jeans, and I walk in with just like a golf shirt or something. And Duffy looks at me. He's this 58-year-old Irishman, and he's wearing a shirt and tie. And he looks at me, and he frowns. Hadn't said anything else about it. He just said, show up on this day. And so I walk into his office, and he looks at me and he says, never come into this office looking like that again.
Whoa.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is just going to work out swell. I'll be back at the store by supper time, right? And so the way my radio career started is, he said, so here's what's going to happen. For the first week, you are going to shadow me. You are going to watch how this operation works. And you can ask questions, but I would just as soon you just watch and study as much as you can study. And so I watched the producer that was working for him at the time, and it should have been a warning sign, because the producer was as helpful as possible, because he wanted to get out from under this guy in the worst way, because he was an ogre. He was just hard on staff around him. He just had an Irish sense of humor, but he had an Irish temper. And it just, when he snapped. So I'm looking around trying to watch this operation, and it's like the world is spinning all around you in, time-lapse photography, and you're trying to take as much as you can. And at the end of the week on that Friday, we had a remote. So I got to watch him do a remote. And then after that, he said, okay, I'm going on vacation. He left on vacation for a week. And the week after that, it was my turn. So I got to watch it a week. I had a week to book the show myself and try and get everything ready. And then by the following week, I basically was sink or swim. And the way he did radio, there's lots of, there's no one right way or wrong way to do radio, as I'm sure you've discovered. Here's how this guy operated. He would come in the morning, and he would sit down to his typewriter, not his computer, his typewriter. And he would he'd have a full ream of paper, a fresh ream of paper every day. And he would put the first thing in on his typewriter, put the first page in. And he would look out the window, and he would start typing out, "Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Warren Duffy. He would script out every word he spoke, and then he would pull that paper out, and in blue ink at the top, or in a blue felt tip pen, he would say intro, or 3 p.m. intro, 4 p.m. intro, and then he would have his rejoinders for the day. He would have his weather forecast, and he would have 4 or 5 different weather things that he intros and tags at the end that he would script out that he would say every day, because he didn't trust himself. He wanted everything to have copy. So he typed his own copy every day. My job was to give him a manila folder that had the run sheet paper clipped to the front. 406 this segment, 420 this segment, 430 this person, just a run sheet for the day. You would open the run sheet, and whoever the first guest was, their current bio would be there, followed by any recent articles or newspaper clippings or anything that would be subject for an interview. Do all that prep and put everything all in order. And then he would start working through that folder, and he would script out all of his interview questions that he would do. And then by the time it was about an hour before showtime, he would take his revised folder of all of his stuff he just typed out and go into his studio and lay everything out the way he wanted to lay it out. And that's how he did it. And it never sounded like he was reading. It always sounded organic. But that's just how he did things. Now, that's one way to do it. I can't begin to tell you how labor-intensive it is, not just for him, but for everybody around him. But that's how I learned to do radio production.
In chat, Severe Cruise Conservative says, BZ, hey, ask Duane how strong the station signal was.
It was FM, and FM compared to AM, it's kind of hard to do signal strength because it means something different. AM works like a giant cone, meaning the transmitter bounces up to the ionosphere, it reflects back in the cone, and depending on how many watts you have is how big that cone goes and how far the reach goes, right? FM, it's all line of sight. So as long as you've got a tower on top of a high peak, as long as you can see that tower, as long as you can see that peak, it can go a long way. And you don't have to have a lot of watts, you don't have to have a lot of radiation to be able to do that. It was probably a good medium high cluster. A signal strength as far as KKLA was. A lot of what Salem does when they started to build their empire is they were able to take a lot of lower bandwidth frequency or stations that didn't have a lot of signal strength because they were pretty inexpensive on the market at the time, and so they were they wanted to go quantity first, and then once they had the quantity, then they packaged them up and did wheeling and dealing and trading, and started to improve in certain cities by trading stations with other things. I mean, it's I guess it's like real estate. If you start buying little plots of land here and there, once you start having a bunch of little plots of land, even though they may not be the best plots of land, quantity can develop a quality all of its own, and you can use that to trade for something bigger and better, right? That's kind of how Salem did their rollout. So I did this with Salem for 5 years. I did Duffy's show, and I can honestly say it was the hardest 5 years I've ever done. It was among the more rewarding because I really took to it like a duck to water. I really didn't think I would be doing this for very long. And there were a lot of days when it was just hard to do, not because of the job, but because of the personalities. But what it taught me is how to have a thick enough skin and how to realize what's important and what's not important. And along the way, I got to meet a whole lot of cool people that I would not have otherwise had a chance to meet. I can tell you all sorts of just bizarre stories of how we would do radio in those days. You may recall a guy named Hal Lindsey who wrote the book The Late Great Planet Earth. He's one of these eschatology writers that writes all sorts of books on what Revelation teaches and where it's going. One of his famous books was The Late Great Planet Earth. He sold a boatload of those books, right? And there was one day when Duffy decided, I just don't want to come to work today. I'm just not feeling, I don't want to come to work today. So what does that mean? Find me a guest host. Okay.
Okay. Easy peasy.
So all the normals that we would normally get couldn't do it in that short notice. And I mean, way down on the depth chart. We're talking like, Donald Trump on the 2016 Republican depth chart. We're going way down the depth chart here, and I get to Hal Lindsey, and I'm thinking, you better call me. You got to have somebody. So I call him. Oh, yeah, I can come down. Okay. Now, this is a guy that has spent 40 years of his adult life translating the book of Revelation from its original Greek. I mean, that's his scope of focus, right?
That's a little esoteric, yeah.
One of the guests that we had on that day, as it turned out, was Mike Sosha. Mike Sosha, at the time, this is before he was the 20-year-long Hall of Fame manager for the Angels. He was with the Dodgers organization back then, and he was doing a benefit charity golf tournament, and he was just driving down for the day to plug his golf tournament. And that's why we booked him. He was a big name. What I was taught, or what I learned, is the ABCs of doing radio, Duffy style. Of how I learned how to do this. Any guest, any topic, anything you do, if you're going to do a guest, it's got to fit one of the ABCs. The A stands for amazing story. If it is something where a guy fell off a cliff, broke his back, learned how to walk again, and in the process of learning how to walk again, saw a vision and came to the Lord. And I mean, if it's some amazing story, you can make that sell pretty easily. Okay, so that's the A. B is a big name, and a big name. The qualification for a big name is, if you have to explain who the person is, it's not a big enough name. Okay. My biggest get, as the first year I did radio ever, my biggest get, and it still has a payoff to me, is I was the first person ever to get Ken Starr, who was then the independent counsel investigating Bill and Hillary Clinton, investigating
Really? Holy crap! That's a get.
I had Ken Starr do an hour with Duffy that everybody else in media then instantly were like, who the frick is this person, and how the frick did they get him? What was your magic juju? And all of a sudden I was instantly on the map. So that was my first get. So I mean, I had big name people before then, but I'm saying a dopey little Christian station that nobody had ever heard of, just in one little market, and they get Ken Starr to come on. That turned heads. So the A is an amazing story. B is a big name. C is controversy. And if a controversy doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be a debate, it just means it's got to be a story that there isn't really necessarily a right answer to it. Meaning, it can be something with a Christian angle. It can be a secular story, but it's got to be something where it's not necessarily, well, you think this way, this one's right, this one's wrong, and do it, Hannity debate style. It's something where the answer is kind of somewhere gray in between, and you can make a case both. It's kind of a gray area thing, and it gets people thinking. That's kind of a controversial thing. So that was kind of how I was taught to do radio. So did this along the way. So Hal Lindsey comes down, and he's got Mike Sosha on that day. And Mike Sosha doesn't know beans about the New Testament. And Hal Lindsey doesn't know he doesn't know home plate from his asshole. I mean, he doesn't know anything about baseball. And so he's saying, so what do we do? And I went, working on it. Why don't you work on something else? You work on something else. So I scripted out an interview with Mike Sosha in Hal Lindsey's voice in about 45 minutes. And so Mike Sosha comes down, and we do this interview. And God bless Hal Lindsey, he walked his way through it, and he had these questions. And he's asking questions like, so let's talk about Mike Piazza. Mike Piazza was, famous catcher for the Dodgers at the time. This is before he left the Dodgers and went to New York. And he says, there's a lot of people talking about Piazza that he's been catching for a few years now. And like with a lot of catchers that can hit, you don't want them to ruin their knees and ruin their legs, spending their whole time behind the dish. So at some point, are you thinking about trying to move him over to first base so you can still take advantage of his bat, but not completely tear up his legs? And so Sosha, who is a former catcher himself, starts thinking, and he starts running with it, and he starts talking in all sorts of baseballese. And he says, "Wow, Hal, that's a really good question." And he starts going down this thing, and I'm sitting in the back going, "Oh my good Lord, what am I doing here?" So after it was over with, it pulled off, and nobody knew any different. Nobody knew that Hal Lindsey didn't know beans about what he was talking about. And Mike Sosha was tickled to death because it turned out not to be a moron interview, and he got to play his golf tournament. So everybody was happy, right? So I got to do things like that all the way along. We would do remotes from car lots. We would do remotes from the back of a yacht in Newport Harbor, where the station was trying to thank its sponsors for the year, its advertisers for the year, like an advertiser luncheon. They would have them hang over, and we strung ISDN phone wire in the ocean under the dock so you wouldn't walk on it and trip on it to the back of the boat. And as long as the shielding didn't get salt water on it, everything was fine, but we actually had to terminate the ISDN line into the back of a boat. Just all sorts of stuff that we had to do. And all this, I didn't really have a teacher. Duffy claimed that he taught me how to do everything, and to be fair, he gave me the greatest opportunity I have ever had, and I'm eternally thankful for the opportunity he gave me. And yes, there were things he taught me. Honestly, what he did is he just said, "Watch me," and then he said, "Now you're on your own. Figure it out, or you're not going to figure it out." And I taught myself how to do it. I just learned and adapted, and just had to sink or swim. And he gave me the patience to do it, and I did it. So a few years into that, as we're always looking for guest hosts, because we never knew when we were one mood away from having a need of an inner guest host. My engineer at the time, a guy named Anthony, had heard Hugh Hewitt on KFI a few times and knew he had a new book coming out called Searching for God in America as part of a PBS TV series he's doing. And then he came out with a book after that called The Embarrassed Believer, which is another theologically based book. And so we brought him in. And so we brought him in as a guest. The way you always got what you wanted with Duffy is you had to kind of plant the seed. And during a break, you would kind of go and whisper in Duffy's ear, and you'd say, "Hey, you know what? Just think about how great your show would be if you had somebody like Hugh be a guest host for you." "Oh, that's a great idea. Hey, Hugh, what would you think about guest hosting my show sometime?" "Oh, I'd love to." "Oh, great. I'll keep your name and number on file. We'll see if we can get you to come in and do it." As long as it was his idea, everything was great, right? So we got Hugh to come in and guest host for us for a few times. And the very first time Hugh guest hosted, we had set this up for 2 weeks. Everything was all lined up. Everything was cool. It was game day. And he comes in at about, 2:30. He was supposed to be on at 4. And as soon as he walked in, he had a cold. And it wasn't contagious, but he had no voice. Severed vocal cords bad. He sounded like he'd been smoking cool since he was 5, right? And he just sounded like a hoarse frog. And I said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine. He said, "I feel fine. It just sounded horrible." But he comes on the air, and he was high energy. He had all the energy in the world, and he moved fast. And he was the same Hugh that we always grew to love. And he said, "I'm here with several vocal cords, but I'm still here." And he did the thing, and he did a phenomenal job considering he sounded like hell to listen to. And we ended up having him guest host, I don't know, a bunch of times. And every time he came in, he says, "I want to get back into radio." Well, this is 3-4 years I've been doing this now, and I had developed my reputation within the network, within Salem. And I said, if you really want to get in, here's the deal. I'll get you in, and I'll get you your show. But you're going to need a producer. And that producer ain't going to be anybody else but me, because you're going to get me the hell out of here. because I was tired of getting screamed at. I got along with you really well.
Okay, so wait a minute. You are the guy that got Hugh Hewitt into radio.
He had already been doing weekend programming on KFI.
But big
time.
time.
He took a break from that because he was doing PBS Life and Times. He was doing TV. And he got tired of going up to L.A. and back every night doing TV. And so he wanted to get back into radio. And he liked Salem because Salem had a theological bent that lined up with his. And he didn't want the cutthroat nature of secular radio, which, by the way, radio is radio. I don't care what your religious background is. Radio is still radio. But he wanted to work a deal with Salem. So I started to kind of massage that and made that happen. Now, granted, Hugh takes any opportunity he has, and he always makes the best of it. But as far as getting him to the right people and getting the doors lined up the right way, yes, that was a planned deal. So I got him to a Salem talk show retreat. I got him to some different things that he needed to go to. And at the time, he was saying, "Do I really need to go to this?" "Yes, you need to go to this." "Okay, well, I'll go to it." And he goes to it. And he says, "That was really cool. I'm glad I went to that." And he got some FaceTime with the right people. And as soon as he got FaceTime with the right people, they said, they just fell in love with him. So we have to have you. So they offered him a national show. And they did the contract. Everything was all golden. And as soon as he had the contract, he says, "Before I sign this, I just need one more thing. I need Dwayne. I need to take Dwayne from Duffy. I hate to do it, but we really need to launch this show the right way." And so they came to me and said, "Would you do it?" "Sure, I'll do it."
So
that's how it got started.
You are responsible for taking Hugh Hewitt, dusting him off, and making him palatable for radio. You are the success story behind Hugh Hewitt. I knew it.
I would almost go there, not quite. Hugh had the radio chops. I didn't have to add anything in as far as radio chops. He knew how to do radio. I didn't have to teach him anything about. God knows I'm still trying to teach him how to do radio, and he still doesn't know. What I did is I just helped facilitate to bring him home and bring him into this network. And once I made those avenues available, he took over from there. And Hugh is Hugh. He can take if you give him an angle, he'll go with it. But he had the chops. I didn't have to work on his formatics. Lord knows I've tried for 20 years to work on his formatics, but he is what he is, and the energy he brings to it, and the stuff that interests him, he resonates with millions of people, and he always has.
I have literally, folks, we're talking to DUANE Patterson, who is the producer for the nationally syndicated Hugh Hewitt Radio Show.
Just think of what we could have gone into if you didn't have a 15-minute intro.
Okay, well, I asked you on the phone before we set this all up, and I'm going to ask you now because I didn't get to a fraction of my questions because I wanted to go all inside radio. But
you said you wanted bio. I gave you the bio.
I know. But the deal is, and you semi-acquiesced, but I'll ask you now so everybody can hear, would you come back? Because there's so many questions that I do want to ask you about inside radio. Production, what do you do? I have so many questions. Here's the deal with me. I came from analog radio. I came from analog terrestrial radio. I learned in a production room with Ampex decks, massive reel-to-reel tape recorders. You had an edit bar. You put the tape in the edit bar. You pulled out your razor blade, and you either made a butt cut. You had the dents in the wall from the failed carts that you threw up against the wall after they failed. Yeah. Everything was either a butt cut or a slightly diagonal cut where you physically cut tape to make edits. Our cart decks were all Sparta. Everything was Sparta, except the KFBK board was a custom board, but everything else was Sparta, including the board in the production room, the damn turntables and all that kind of stuff. People that don't know what a cart deck is, can you feature like an 8-track? And so I come from that era.
Think of an 8-track slightly less sophisticated.
Yes, where you would have a preloaded amount of tape on a given cart, which would, and I think carts came in like 30, 45, 60 second, blah, 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 ad nauseum. And you had to bulk erase the carts after each use. So that's the radio that I come from. I would love someday to be able to sit in someone's show and watch how radio is actually done today digitally. That's what fascinates me about this. I know all the analog stuff, did all that junk, but I'd love to find out how the digital stuff works.
I'd be happy to. Yeah, I came in on the tail end of carts when you would have to lay down the commercial spot on a cart tape, and you would have to put just enough tape so it would turn around and cycle back to the start if the cart worked right, which half the time it didn't. And we went from carts to there was a standalone board called an instant replay unit where you could actually load the commercial spots onto a little hard disk that had a bunch of quick access hot buttons that you could just start punching in sequence. And we thought that was the bee's knees to recording the show on, instead of recording the show on reel to reel, you record it on cassettes. To then we started recording them on CDs, so we'd have air checks on CDs, and boy, we thought that was great. That was totally cool. And now you just record them and throw them in the cloud. But I went from the tail end of the cart era to now. I mean, I'm redesigning the studio right now as we speak, and I'm at the point now where I'm using NDI video, and I've turned 2 or 3 different computers in my office into their own virtual inputs into my video streaming computer, so that if he wants a YouTube clip, I can now fire off a YouTube clip and have it play as video to our streaming audience within seconds. Just the capabilities that we can do, I'm still learning stuff every day. We used to clip articles out of newspapers. Everything's, it's just, print off what you need online. It's just the radio has so revolutionized how it's done, and it's not even close to being done yet, because for it to survive, radio is now having to embrace video. Everybody wants to be a voyeur. Everybody wants to see how the sausage is made. So you have to do everything now with video in mind. We're having guests now by Skype more than we are, 50-50 to phone calls now. And that never used to be the case.
Thanks for being here tonight. I know you got to go, and the reason I say that, folks that don't know DUANE Patterson, and he produces the Hugh Hewitt Radio Show. Hugh used to be on at 5 p.m. Pacific, and Hugh and DUANE were in the same studio, and then Hugh moved way to the East Coast. Hugh's show is now on, instead of 5 p.m. Pacific, it's on at 3 a.m. Pacific. So
morning drive, baby.
That's
morning
right.
Drive in the East Coast, which it's hell on me as far as working overnight. But I'll tell you what,
that's my point.
It's awfully influential. Well,
he made a great move, and as much as it disappointed the Tribbles, that was the thing to have done. Duane, can I have you back? There's so many other questions that I'd like to talk about radio. Sure. We didn't even get to politics or anything like that, but there's the current state of radio, the future of radio. I know you got to get to Betty by because you got to do stuff and get ready for the show at 3 a.m., so that's only 6 hours from now, which means you probably are up by like 2 a.m. or 1 a.m., so 9, 10, 11, 12. So you got 4 hours. Yeah, you'll get a good 4 hours sleep tonight. Yeah, great, wonderful. So Duane...
Yes, I will come back.
Patterson, thank you ever so kindly for being here tonight and for really staying up late. And I'd love to have you back, sir. Thanks.
You got. Take care.
You bet. God bless. Take care and be safe, sir.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. And per normal, I didn't get to a fraction my questions because that's how I roll here in the saloon. Thanks to everybody for being here. If you hang on, I've got another great hour coming up. Lots of radio, lots of audio, and it's going to be about, hey, this CHAZ thing. What the hell is that? So if you stick with me, I think you'll become educated and have a great time. Thanks to everybody in chat. Thanks to everybody, all the Tribbles who came over to listen to Duane. And for those who are in Facebook, on Spreaker, I appreciate you being here. We're going to take a break. Be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick you bellows as host, and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York. The Lid himself, Jeff Dunnett. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunnett.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Good evening. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show is featured on the SHR Media Network every Tuesday and Thursday night for 2 hours at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific. Whilst manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ continues to radically change the world of leftists, one diaper at a time. Stop balancing your checkbooks. Stop cleaning your fish tanks. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show is your magnet for truth, justice, obesity, a darkened studio, and late-night freedom. No United States of America freedoms were abridged in the making of this ad.
This is Shannon Wright.
And this is Michael Wright.
Reminding you to listen
to The Right Way with Shannon and Mike.
Every Monday through Thursday.
7 to 9 a.m.
Right here on SHRmedia.com.
Join me, Jack Alexander, for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the issues affecting the USA. I fearlessly take on the issues that everyone else is too scared to touch. The Jack Alexander Experiment podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be found, like Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. The Jack Alexander Experiment, because it's not a matter of left versus right, it's a matter of right versus wrong.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense Elite Radio Show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EDL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Featuring the effervescent contrarian Sackheads Clint, plus the unrestrained bulbosity of BZ, the Sackheads Against Tyranny is a real chat show. Doubling your late-night conservative talk show pleasure with double the hosts, you can listen every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Please note, some contents may have settled during shipping. Member FDIC, batteries not included, warranty void in Montenegro.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Folks, thanks for listening to the show, BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show. Live and direct, where I'm broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California. Always spell it with a K. 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the Capitol building in Sacramento, California. That was DUANE Patterson in the first hour. Got to have him back. I love radio stories, and I hope you do too. I wanted to find out. DUANE is a fabulous repository of all things radio. And the reason that I wanted to have him on and pick his brain is, as I indicated, I know all the old stuff. I don't know crap about how you run a show now, digitally. I mean, I know this little portion of what it is that I do right now, and I've got some equipment, but it ain't like what DUANE has at all, period, end of statement. And I really appreciate all the people that were here tonight. Alaskan Sergeant Booker, Traveling Cynic, Silmarini, Leslie Holker, Major Bob, Jack Alexander, and Simone, and all the other people that were here before. I know it's a late-night radio show. If you run with me, I think you'll also continue to have a good... Oh, over in Facebook, Breck is there, and a lot of other folks. Jeremy, thanks for being here tonight. Also appreciate that for the folks that are watching on Facebook. Still trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with Facebook, because Facebook is so incredibly flaky these days. I'm going to talk about CHAZ Chop for a second. Perhaps you're wondering what CHAZ Chop is. I kind of think that CHAZ Chop is having an identity crisis of its own. So what is CHAZ? CHAZ is the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. That's in Seattle. But let's do a little introduction with that tonight. I have to tell you that never in my 7 decades on the planet did I think that I would ever be talking about events that seem to have stemmed from fiction. There's a guy I've had on the show before. I'm going to make reference to him in just a second. Now, I have read George Orwell's 1984. Folks, if you have not read 1984, you need to go quick like a bunny, get a copy of that, and read the sucker. Also, I would highly recommend Aldous Huxley's, A-L-D-O-U-S, Huxley, H-U-X-L-E-Y, his book, Brave New World. And yes, the words, phrases, and actions coming from members of the American left are strikingly similar to entire sections of both books. It's creepy. In another world and another time, I would have said something similar to, that's an interesting analysis, or isn't that quaint about that book? But people are dying in America right now because of all of this. We have jumped the shark. We've jumped time. We've jumped fiction. We've pissed all over the air brakes. We've climbed into Dr. Peabody's Wayback Machine in order to realize that, yeah, that Orwell dude was right. And another author, too. One that you may have not read, but you got to go and pick up his books. But I've had him on the internet radio show right here in the Saloon 5 times. And that's the guy who is a veteran. He's an attorney. He's a commentator and author. And that's Kurt Schlichter. So what Kurt Schlichter did in his books is this. He said, I want to write a book about the most fanciful, the most egregious, the most stupid potential scenario in the history of the United States. And I want to have some fun with it. I want to push it to extremes, and then I want to push it a little bit more. So his first book was called People's Republic. It's about a dystopian kind of near future where politics have gotten to the point where the United States has become balkanized. The states grew apart, and they segmented themselves into blue and red areas, and then they had a civil war. And then things got worse. Now, Kurt is up to a total of, okay, I'm going to have to try to remember this. He's got 4 books now. The first was Republic, People's Republic. The second one is Indian Country. The third is Wildfire. And the fourth is Collapse. And so guess what? Just when everybody was calling Kurt Schlichter a loon and every other foul word imaginable because he happens to be a militant normal like myself, hey, turns out things in America are following Schlichter's books. So fiction does become reality. Fit reficta in Latin. Just as I used to say for years when I was amazed at various happenstances, I used to always say, and this was a catchphrase for a really long time, and I'm sure you guys have said it too at least once, you can't write this stuff. Well, yeah, turns out you can write this stuff. So let's begin. Our story starts in the Minneapolis riots and the national rioting that occurred. Now, once the riots died down a bit, the whole paradigm shifted into, remember this, and I went into this for about 2 hours last Thursday, defund the police. I had Ken McClinton on the show. I had a ton of in-depth information about defunding the police and what does that mean and what does it look like. So President Trump clearly condemned the death of George Floyd, despite every attempt by what I call the LDAM, the leftist Democrats and the American media maggots, to say that he has not. People continue to say that he never condemned that. So we end up then following defund the police into Seattle, Washington. And if you do not know, folks, Seattle, Washington is the very definition of the hub of Antifa and anarchy. So kind of like a Marvel origin story, but instead this is evil incarnate. The precipitous collapse of America is going to find its origins in the decision to pull all of the Seattle police officers out of its East Precinct. It was abandoned. We know it was abandoned, even though they said it wasn't, because officers pulled out all the stuff. They pulled out all the files. They pulled out all the equipment, all the evidence, and every officer left with all their vehicles. Now, call me crazy, call me wacky. That seems a lot like abandonment to me. So, within that decision, there are 2 major government Seattle players, I guess you could call them, involved in this debacle in Seattle. Both are women, and that's going to be Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan, good old Mayor Jenny. She's a massive leftist with no rudder position available except that of hard aport. And then the second player is also the head of the Seattle Police Department. That is Chief Carmen Best, although apparently not really. Okay, also as a slight aside, if you guys remember on May 31st, President Trump announced that Antifa was designated a terrorist organization. I'm waiting for that to mean something. And we also learned from the Washington Times that Antifa has planned anti-government insurgency for months. Law enforcement officials are admitting. Their law enforcement officials would not speak on the record about Antifa's plans as the election season heads up. Longtime analysts of the group say such a move would be entirely in character. They were the key focus for investigators in the wake of violent protests and looting across the country after the death of George Floyd, and they've been involved in, I would assume, and suggest every riot across the United States. If you think for a moment, folks, that you don't have Antifa elements in your town, you would be wrong. There's a guy called Joe Myers. He's a former DIA official. That's Defense Intelligence Agency. And he's a counterinsurgency expert. And he said this. This is a direct quote. Heads up, folks. President Trump's election and revitalization of America, they are a threat to Antifa's nihilist goals. They are fomenting this violence to create havoc, despair, and target the Trump campaign for defeat in 2020. Now, because I frequently play this, although I'm not going to tonight, if, folks, you remember Dr. Robert Epstein talking to Senator Ted Cruz in a hearing, and he said it's easily within the purvey of Facebook, Google, and any other social media outlet, leftist by nature, to skew votes by up to not 15, not 1,500, not 15,000, 15 million votes in whatever way they wish. Perhaps next Thursday, this coming Thursday, I'll play that. So all you need to know about Antifa is that Seattle is in Antifa's backyard. And you remember the video that came out recently from Project Veritas, where they talked about Antifa?
With Real City Antifa since July of 2000. Depending on the setting, if I were to be caught or found out in a setting where I am present with them, it could escalate to violence against me.
Don't be that f***ing guy with the goddamn spiked brass knuckles getting photos taken of you. Police are going to be like, perfect, we can prosecute these f***ers. Look how violent they are. Right? Not that we're not, but we need to f***ing hide.
Here's a lovely fight in Portland, Oregon. Too bad you can't see the video. Antifa, Portland, Oregon. Oh, yeah. Also, Antifa's backyard. To the point where, oh, did you know, by the way, that Antifa is in Athens, Greece? Antifa's international, besides being in Portland and Seattle.
So currently I am a prospect for Rose City Antifa, and I am about halfway through the prospecting process to become a full-fledged member of Antifa.
If you ruin their day, if you heckle them, you make them feel like they look ridiculous, you make them feel outnumbered, and therefore their whole yay, yay, America, Trump thing is going to go by the wayside.
That's Rose City Antifa.
Proton Mail, and we went back and forth, and there was an interview set to meet up in Portland. So to verify that it was me, they had me wear a white shirt and have a water bottle and show up at a Starbucks where a person was going to ID me and approach me and asked who I was, and I told them, and I followed them to the destination where the interview was going to be held.
You have to be interviewed for Antifa.
We went to a place called Imperial. They were getting this tradecraft from someone else, someone with much more experience, someone who did this for a living.
Tradecraft.
Caroline, which is the founder of RCA, moved to Sweden.
Caroline Victorin, Victorin.
With her husband, who is a dual citizen. So there's a back and forth with a European connection.
George Soros.
Rose City Antifa holds required lectures for prospective members in secret at In Other Words bookstore before they open. And as part of their security culture, they require us to put our phones in the bathroom next door. This bathroom is not only away from the main room where the lecture is taking place, but also has a fan that muffles any sound from the room.
So these aren't stupid people.
The whole goal of this, right, is to get out there and do dangerous things as safely as possible.
How violent is Antifa or RCA in particular?
Practice things like an eye gouge. It takes very little pressure to injure someone's eyes.
They do not hesitate to either push back or incite some kind of violence. In our classes and in our meetings, before we do any sort of demonstration or black bloc, we talk about weapons detail and what we carry and what we should have. What is black bloc? Well, this is black bloc right now. The term is used to a tactic in which individuals conceal their identity to look uniform so that no one can be identified in an act of a crime. With RCA, it seems much more structured, almost like a company or like a business.
Okay, so when he says RCA, that's Rose City Antifa.
So, I feel like there is some type of outside funding, influence, or resources being used.
Consider like
outside
destroying
funding.
your enemy, not like delivering a really awesome right hand, left eye blow, It's not boxing, it's not kickboxing, it's like destroying your enemy.
So the goal is destroy the enemy. Well, let's continue. One thing we did know, and we're going to discover again shortly, is that a society that makes war on its police had better become great friends with its criminals. And Seattle these days has definitely taken that to heart. It started with this. It started on June 8th. Seattle protesters declare cop-free zone after police leave the precinct. The Seattle police abandoned their precinct. Protesters declared a cop-free zone near where Seattle police boarded up and seemingly abandoned their East Precinct building Monday night, according to local reports, following days of demonstrations. But with the building boarded up and police gone from the area, at least some demonstrators apparently decided to stay in place. The first night was rainy and peaceful, and then it began. The city's police chief, that's Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, said the police would further alter their approach to handling protests in the area. The new approach then became really, really evident in a bunch of images that were taken. And they showed handwritten signs taped to barricades in the area with messages including Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. That's where CHAZ comes from. Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Capitol Hill is kind of a tony little area in Seattle. And you're now leaving the USA. That's exactly how they wanted. CHAZ was born, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Seattle Police, by the way, noted on Twitter the department is still responding to 911 calls. You know what? Not for long. Once CHAZ was created and Antifa and anarchist elements, they decided to wall off a 6-block section, one of the nicest portions of downtown Seattle. So it was time to flex some muscles, and they produced a set of demands. Here's some of them. The first demand is Seattle Police Department and attached court system are beyond reform. We do not request reform. We demand abolition, as in not just defund the police, just get rid of the police. They demand the dismantlement police. They demand an end to the school-to-prison pipeline, the abolition of youth jails, get cops out of schools. We demand that the city government, not the state government, but the federal government launch a full-scale investigation into past and current cases of police brutality. They demand reparations. They demand the city of Seattle make the names of officers involved in police brutality a matter of public record. Anonymity should not be a privilege in public service. So they show up at your house. They have an entire list of demands. Go to my blog, bloviatingzeppelin.net, and you'll see the entire list. But yeah, hey, it's a slight list, nothing too extensive or costly, right? So, meanwhile, back at the ranch, Washington Governor Jay Inslee thought the whole affair was just good, clean fun. It was worth chuckling about. So he laughs about Antifa's rebellion in Seattle at the same time that he decides he's going to demobilize the National Guard. Well, he had an interview, and this is what Washington Governor Jay Inslee happened to say about, Antifa. And he knows fully who they are and what they are.
Governor, I'd like to ask you about what's going on in Seattle. There's this thing called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What's your thought on that? The fact that the protesters have taken that over and not allowing people to come and go freely? Regarding the National Guard.
Well, that's news to me, so I'll have to reserve any comment about it. I have not heard anything about that from any credible source. Not that you're not credible. It's just like before I espouse an opinion, I should know of which.
This is one day into it, and Jay Inslee is professing ignorance.
I speak.
Keith, you mentioned having a follow-up.
Yeah, as far as the National Guard, how long are you going to keep them there? And if there is a takeover of a street in Seattle where they're barricading, keeping people out, the protesters are, would you want the Guard to be involved?
That's a hypothetical. Look, we've got to have safety. I'm sure that people will find a way to have public safety everywhere in the state. I'm confident of that. The National Guard is demobilizing. Over 2/3 of them were demobilized of yesterday. I don't know if they're completely demobilized at this point or not, but if not, that'll be shortly, I believe.
And that was the extent to which Governor Jay Inslee of Washington took Antifa, as in, not seriously. Well, it's a love fest, isn't it? Isn't that what Seattle Mayor Jenny said? Mayor Jenny, listen to her talk about the summer of love with Chris Cuomo, and I think I'm going to have to start this thing and start it right around here.
Mayor of Seattle now going toe-to-toe with the president today, but let's deal with her own problems at home in her backyard first. Jenny.
Okay. Hang on, because I've got somebody else talking.
The rest of us should not allow them to wreck it, but we are allowing them. And it's infuriating.
And I have to find out.
We've definitely been infuriated, genuinely. If you've watched the show,
where this is.
I don't want to apologize for that. Here's why. The last thing
because I don't want Tucker speaking
yet another red-faced screamer shouting about this or that.
Right now.
To the extent that's been us, we're sorry. We genuinely want to help fix this disaster.
So I got to figure out where Tucker is coming from. There we go. That's where Tucker's coming from Jay Inslee. Now, let's go back to Chris Cuomo, and he's going to be talking to Seattle Mayor Jenny. Go ahead.
Durkin, welcome back, Ms. Mayor. It's good to have you.
Good to see you, Chris. Glad you're back and healthy.
Thank you. Thank you for the good word. So I don't have to tell you about the situation on the ground in your city, but in terms of how it looks to the rest of the country and the president teeing it up as basically ineptitude, the inability to control your own streets. Is that fair criticism?
Oh, no.
So I know it will shock you that the president is perhaps not giving an accurate or truthful picture. We've got 4 blocks in Seattle that you just saw pictures of that is more like a block party atmosphere. It's not an armed takeover.
It's a block party, and it wasn't 4 blocks. It was 6 blocks. There's her first lie.
It's not a military junta. We will make sure that we can restore this, but we have block parties and the like in this part of Seattle all the time. It's known for that. So I think the president, number one, there is no threat right now to the public, and we're taking that very seriously. We're meeting with businesses and residents.
Really?
But what the president threatened is illegal and unconstitutional. And the fact that he can think he can just tweet that and not have ramifications is just wrong.
Okay. Tell you what, let's continue. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin defends Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. She says it's patriotic. The Autonomous Zone is a patriotic area. So she said she was in communication with residents. No, she wasn't. She said business owners and protesters are having a great time. It's not an armed Antifa militia. It's not a no-go zone. Neither Durkin nor Police Chief Best, who was also at the press conference, detailed specific plans for how to deal with the zone or a timeline for all the cops returning to the precinct. In the meantime, there are lots of photos of people, white people, all males, except for one, carrying long guns, semi-automatic rifles. You know, the same guns that Antifa doesn't want for you. Guns? What guns? This is from CNN. The finest name in news. Just ask them. Hey, speaking of which, I'm going to continue on. I just want to let you folks know that
conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Here's how CNN typified it. Right-wing media, it's all their fault. Right-wing media says Antifa militants have seized part of Seattle. Local authorities say otherwise. Armed militant activists with the group Antifa have seized a sizable section of Seattle and are plotting to expand their territory, all as the local police surrender to them and evacuate a local precinct. Now remember, this is CNN saying this, or so the story goes if you've relied on right-wing media for your news this week. CNN refuses to address the truth, but of course not. Why would they? So as CHAZ changed the name of a portion of Seattle, so I thought to myself, I think the name of Seattle is a little too pedestrian. It's kind of grounded in historical repression of indigenous people. So I came up with myself Newmarks City or Leninville or Stasi Central or maybe Commie City, Cheland, Engelstown, or my favorite, Woke Child Mob City. I got to say I like that one the best. And so the New York Times weighed in as well with the Mighty Gray Lady. And essentially what they said that it was a homeland for racial justice. It's a homeland for racial justice. They said that it was a glowing area. A major feature was free food, free speech, and free of police. That was the title of their article, by the way. And it's 1968 all over again. It's the summer of love, just like Chief Durkin happened to say. Durkin?
Insurrectionists, the Marxists now occupying roughly 6 blocks of Seattle are calling it this no police zone, and a show of defiance, these activists, which are their mix of BLM and Antifa, have actually put up barricades all around their holdings. So why didn't the police want to take it back, and by force if necessary? Well, my next guest is here to tell us. Michael Sloan is the president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild. Michael, what's holding the police back tonight?
Hey, Laura, I want to thank you for having me on, as it is my privilege to represent the proud professional public safety officers, 1,300 men and women of the Seattle Police Officers Guild. Mm-hmm. We are beside ourselves. The city has lost all the political will to enforce the rule of law. There is an unreasonable activist fringe that is unfortunately stealing the peaceful protest message for justice for George Floyd. And then now they're occupying over a 6-block area of the city of Seattle. It is absolutely unreasonable activism, and we are pulling our hair out because we are true public safety professionals that took an oath of service, and we are holding our elected leaders responsible for this travesty on the overall amazing Seattle community that are law-abiding citizens that are yearning for police officer public safety services, which we professionally provide on a daily basis. It's out of control.
Michael, where are these law-abiding Seattle folks who are up in arms about the trashing of property, as we're seeing in Virginia, as we saw in Minneapolis, as we saw in New York? saw in L.A., Santa Monica, where are all the people standing up and said, oh, no, you won't? Where are they?
Yeah, well, they are the most group that is impacted by this.
I'll tell you where they are.
Where's their voice? Why is it that the city council and certain members of the unreasonable activist crowd, why are they taking control of this public safety narrative, which is impacting every one of us?
Well, Michael, I think you're being too kind. I got to say, I'm very upset tonight. I got to say, I don't like what I'm seeing. I was just in Seattle not too long ago. It's a beautiful city. Obviously.
Okay, stop. I went 210 over 190 last week on Thursday. I went 210 over 190 a little bit earlier today over all of this. So in Seattle, it's a fun time for all. What a romp. Except it's not quite so much fun for residents who don't dare to venture out, Seattle PD. They're afraid to stick their noses out of the damn door, and a bit of reality managed to crash into that. There was crime, like real crime, but not in our utopia. And then something untoward really happened. The chief and the mayor started to part ways. The chief actually came out, and she had the temerity to say, we're not able to get to 911 calls for rape and robbery in the autonomous zone. And so she addressed her troops. She may have seen a little bit of the writing on the wall.
SPD family, I say that because that is what you are. You are my family. And family is honest with each other, and family has tough times, but in the end, we always remain family. We are all going through one of the toughest times ever in the history of the Seattle Police Department. Mm-hmm. I know how incredibly difficult these past 2 weeks have been for you and for your families. To say thank you will never probably...
By the way, if you didn't know, 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, occasionally with 1 day off.
...be enough. But thank you. This department cares about you. I care about you. And although it may not seem true at this moment...
That's a lie.
Your community cares about you.
That's a lie, too.
I want to update you all on the situation at the East Precinct. The decision to board up the precinct, our home, the first precinct I worked in, was something I have been holding off. You should know, leaving the precinct was not my decision. You fought for days to protect it. I asked you to stand on that line, day in and day out, to be pelted with projectiles, to be screamed at, threatened, and in some cases hurt. Then to have a change of course nearly 2 weeks in, it seems like an insult to you and our community. Ultimately, the city had other plans for the building and relented to severe public pressure.
Public pressure.
I'm angry about how the...
So as she's speaking in the background, here's the truth.
Maybe leaked to the public.
She still has a job, and she had decisions to make. She could have ordered her officers back into that precinct to take it back early when they still had the ability to do so, and the streets of the CHAZ area were not rampant with Antifa members carrying long guns. She had the ability to do that. Now, once having ordered Seattle PD back into those streets to take the precinct back, in return, she would likely have lost her job from the mayor and the city council. But sometimes sacrifices have to be made, and the sacrifice was the citizens of Seattle as well as the police department officers that she allegedly serves. You have to do the right thing every once in a while. So that was her, Seattle Chief Carmen Best, throwing Mayor Jenny under the bus. So I wonder, after that, really, even though she didn't protect the citizens and didn't really seem much to care about her own officers, how long is she going to be there in Seattle? And then she does the worst thing yet. She admits her inability to protect the public in public. That video you just heard was her addressing her troops. Now in public, she's going to say, well, she's going to say this.
However, I do believe that most people in Seattle support the police department and its officers.
Okay.
Even though they may not be the ones posting on social media. They and I will continue to have your back.
Stop. Now, let's listen to Chief Best.
Our 911 response times have tripled in the area. They've gone from just over 5 minutes to about 18 minutes. Rapes, robberies, and all sorts of violent acts have been occurring in the area that we're not able to get to. So it is not right for us not to be able to deploy our officers here.
Chief Best spoke with protesters several times, and she and command staff evaluated the building and found someone did breach the facility.
There is some damage, and it clearly is a mess around here, so we need to do a lot.
Yeah, it's clearly a mess around there. Chief Best abandoned her people. That was an active choice that she made. Then this article emerged from King 5. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkham, she made the call to remove barriers around the East Precinct. So, this is interesting. What are some of the first things that Antifa did in beautiful downtown CHAZ? The first thing that CHAZ did was, note this please, erect borders, install armed guards, start ID checks, control who enters and exits. They enabled stop and frisk. They instituted cash shakedowns for protection of businesses, and also the same thing for citizens in their homes. Citizens aren't out. Citizens are fearful to go outside. Well, what happened to Utopia? Why are these people getting hungry? Why are they requesting, sometimes demanding, some very specific stuff? Did they have that luxury? Well, apparently so. Here's what they're demanding. We need clothing. Please avoid clothing donations from major labels. Drab brown clothing preferred. Please remove logos from anything waterproof. That's their demand for clothing. And they even had I don't know if I can say this in public, they had a whiteboard. They need clothes. Male pants, male large shirts, men's shoes, ice, the good kind. They need cigarettes, lanterns. They need portable solar chargers. They need Gatorade. They need tents, sleeping poles, packs, tarps. They need track phone cards. They need, are you sitting down? They need baby lotion. They need bedding. They need zip ties. They need folding chairs. They need laundry bags. And I forgot. They need disinfectant and sunglasses. So, equanimity apparently came into play when Major Durkin additionally decided it's going to be a great idea to give the mob a fire station as well. I got to ask, who gets to clang the bell and who gets to toot the horn? But I bet you didn't hear this chirped out on the American Media Magazine, did you? No. Seattle cedes a fire station to protesters to turn into a community center. Well, what about that community center? Let's listen.
Spoke to one of the organizers who's a part of the group pushing for community ownership here in the Central District. He says they still don't have the keys and they don't have the deed yet. But the city's announcement today is a step forward. Fire Station 6 has been decommissioned and unused for years. Community leaders have long pushed for the property to better serve the historically black Central District.
Appears to be a step in the right direction, and we're glad that the mayor recognizes that bold and unprecedented investments are needed to bring equity and shared prosperity to our community.
Africatown, along with the King County Equity Now Coalition, came up with
Africatown. What would happen if someone named a portion of a city White Town?
The list of demands for direct investment in the black community, one of which is to turn the fire station into the William Gross Center for Cultural Innovation.
Cultural innovation. That's what we need. You know, you got to say something similar to fuck it. If you don't need cops, then who needs fire protection? because they realize both of those aspects are actually overrated. Okay, one thing that you heard is that it was a station that was unused. One thing Seattle forgets, however, is that infrastructure is really, really costly. It's very costly. And if you want to reactivate a station because, I don't know, let's say you get some kind of crazy spate of building or expansion or high-rises or a population increase, well, you're looking at another series of millions of dollars. So in the meantime, CHAZ worried about some really, really heady stuff. Like, what did CHAZ really mean? And wasn't it time to change CHAZ's name just on account of because? Well, so they did. CHAZ changes its name to CHOP and drops autonomous after complaints. So leftists complained about their own leftist name. Amid concerns that federal officials could storm an autonomous zone that had declared itself a separate nation from the United States, residents of Seattle, Washington's CHAZ, or Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, have changed their installation's name to CHOP, the Capitol Hill Organized Protest. CHAZ was its original name. Well, it was an autonomous zone. An autonomous zone. Are they an autonomous collective? Does that remind you of anything? It does me.
Didn't know we had a king. I thought we were an autonomous collective.
You're fooling yourself. We're living in a dictatorship. A self-perpetuating autocracy in which the working classes...
Oh, there you go, bringing class into it again.
That's what it's all about. If only people would...
Please, good people, I am in haste. Who lives in that castle?
No one lives there.
Then who is your lord?
We don't have a lord.
Seattle?
What? I told you. We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week.
Yes.
But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting.
Yes, I see.
By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs.
Be quiet.
But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more...
Be quiet. I order you to be quiet.
Seattle is a Monty Python movie.
I'm your king.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
You don't vote for kings.
Well, how'd you become king, then?
The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in the purest shimmering samite, held aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water, signifying by divine providence that I, Arthur, was to carry Excalibur. That is why I'm your king.
Sean in Facebook chat says, I'm making Sean Nation tomorrow. Start making barriers, even though I believe it's no walls and no borders. Come join me. Come join Sean to make Sean Nation.
Listen, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony.
Be quiet.
You can't expect to wield supreme executive power just because some watery tart threw a sword at you.
Shut up!
I mean, if I went round saying I was an emperor just because some moistened bint had lobbed a scimitar at me, they'd put me away.
Shut up! Will you shut up?
Ah, now we see the violence inherent in the system.
Shut up!
Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system. Help, help, I'm being repressed.
I'm being repressed.
Oh, what a giveaway.
Oh, what a giveaway. But here's the reality right now for Seattle residents locked into CHAZ CHOP. This is what passes for law enforcement there. Lies, no health, no protection, no safety. Now, Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best said, and this is a quote, there is no cop-free zone in the city of Seattle. She said past Monday about the occupied protest zone, saying there's no area of the city that police cannot respond to. SPD will respond to things that threaten life and safety, she said. So she holds a press conference after some reports that emergency responders weren't able to get into and respond to calls from inside the protest zone. But listen to what she says. This is an adult. Best said that officers did not respond to calls last night and observed from a distance, but did not see anything that was a threat to life and safety. So let me see if I get this right, Chief Best. Officers, this is a quote, observed from a distance. They were called on 911. Well, that's certainly sufficient to make folks feel real comfortable. Yep, they'll say, I sure feel better. The cops are observing our problems from a distance. Now, that's American policing. Then she continued, we're trying to avoid anything that will escalate. We're working hard to get a peaceful resolution. She said the officers are going to try. Listen to this. She's going to have the officers try and coordinate with the victim or the caller to meet outside CHOP boundaries whenever possible to avoid conflicts with protesters. Okay. I actually said that in 2020 America. Here's what's going to happen. You'll call 911. Police will go to the perimeter, the periphery of CHAZ CHOP, but you'll have to come to them. Better yet, just come to the border. They can't or they won't. Best did say that response times in the East Precinct have been affected broadly, and it's taking 3 times longer for emergency responders to arrive. How did that happen? Oh, she emphasized one last time that officers are responding, and this is just a small fragment of the city that's caused a lot of attention. What part of any of that made sense whatsoever in a large American city circa 2020? We're the cops. We're not coming to you. You come to us? We're too afraid to take back the streets. We might offend somebody. We might hurt someone. Pay no attention to those rapes and crimes beyond the border. I guess they don't really count. I want you to listen to this, if you have the stomach. This is the lovely Chief Carmen Best once again speaking, giving an update on Monday.
That come from within those boundaries. There was a report last night in the 1700 block of 12th Avenue of someone breaking windows with hammers. The caller also reported that his business was on fire. The officers responded to the call, and they observed the location from a distance. They did not see any signs of smoke or fire.
They observed from a distance.
Or anything else. And
they didn't see evidence of smoke or a fire or broken windows, because they're observing from a distance. This is an adult in Seattle in 2020, a chief of police in America.
Did not see a disturbance. The officers did not observe, based on the report that I read, anything that they perceived as a threat to life safety, and they didn't go in. According to the report,
they didn't go in. Translated, they didn't do their job.
A supervisor called the business owner. The call went to voicemail, so we had no other contact. So I would ask that business owners, when they call 911, they provide...
Okay, did you hear what she just said? We're not going to go in. A business is on fire. People are throwing hammers through windows. We'll stop at the border, look to see if we see any 20-foot flames issuing from a building. What? No flames? No 20-foot flames? Okay, clear.
Provide additional information and a contact number that we're able to pick up. We're also...
They're going to give you a report and a contact number to call back if any of that happens to be true.
Responding to calls for service in the CHOP area with caution. We do not want to escalate under the current situation any potential danger to any of the community and put them in any unnecessarily into harm's way.
Okay, I speak leftist, so I'll translate for you. That means we can't harm the protesters. The citizens that are trapped in that autonomous area, CHAZ CHOP, or whatever the fuck they're calling it today, those people can go straight to hell. They're the people that are making and paying the taxes. The protesters, yeah, those are the ones that we have to protect in Seattle in 2020. So maybe Chief Best is thinking, if we pretend they don't exist, they really won't exist. Then we won't have to tally those crimes on the backs of our crime reports, because that's how the FBI gets crime stats. If you don't send the stats to the FBI, your city doesn't look like it's falling apart. Imagine that. So it's time to remind everybody that leftists, just like the Republicans, they eat their young. Many times, leftists discover that they are insufficiently left for the left. CHAZ Chop's self-appointed armed warlord being one of them. Here's an article, Irony Overlord, Autonomous Zone Warlord may soon be canceled because of old homophobic tweets. Here's his tweet that I put into my blog, not in Twitter, but I took a screen capture of it. How is your rap? This is from Raz Simone. Raz Simone is the warlord of CHAZ Chop. How's your rap? Ha ha ha. Couldn't even say it. Close you get to being a rapper is being the poster boy for the faggot community, Malcolm. Wait. Dethroned? Potentially? Raz dethroned at such an early age for writing the word faggot? The WCM, the woke child mob purity test. The purity test. Well, apparently some black dudes can't even pass it. Then came President Trump. And he said, take back your city, or I'm going to do it. Thomas Sowell wrote some very important words in 2009. He said, if you're not prepared to use force to defend civilization, then be prepared to accept barbarism. But the big question is this, and this is what I think a lot of people have been waiting for tonight. What's that going to look like? Taking back Seattle. What's that going to look like? Now, from my perspective, I'm suggesting this. Give the people what they want. This is Seattle. Consider the source. The Seattle mayor wants CHAZ Chop undisturbed. We know that Chief Best doesn't have the guts to apply her officers, and now, having waited so long, okay, we know the one thing is this: the mob is armed with long guns. The photographs are all over the internet displaying same. So windows of opportunity are frequently open for really small periods of time. Seattle had a chance to take back their streets and to take back the East Precinct, much less having acquiesced to giving all those things away in the first place for no reason whatsoever. Just to appease, just to capitulate. But that's what Seattle wants. Listen to them. This is what Seattle wants. The mayor wants it. The governor wants it. The chief is weak and wants to keep her job. But the most important part of all, this is what the people of Washington, and specifically Seattle, voted for. They voted for all of this shit. I say, give it to them. Let them wallow in its splendid cesspool. Let them smell the waste. Let them taste the depths of depravity. Let them know what it feels like to have nobody in any government position of authority really give a shit about you, to spout platitudes, to make speeches, and ultimately just to let the residents of CHAZ Chop be abandoned. You can go to hell. You're a taxpayer. You can go to hell. Love me some protesters. You guys well and truly are on your own. So I say, let there be actual consequences for stupidity this time. Let this festering dump be just that. Let them wade around in their own filth and squalor, courtesy of the greatness of leftism. Let them do that. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is, at this point, quite likely going to be a shooting war. I honestly think, for a great part, Seattle's gone. The way we knew it. At least for a time. Now, I don't know. Maybe the occupiers of CHAZ Chop are going to lay down their arms. Literally, lay down their arms. They're well armed. Lay down their placards and just mumble and shuffle away quietly. Perhaps they won't. One thing we do know, the will doesn't exist at this point to bring Seattle back. Not by local or state government, not by the police, not by the Seattle PD, not by Chief Carmen Best. So again, I emphasize, they want it? Give them what they want. Give them what they voted for. They want it. They loved it. They embraced it. It was a little lizard. Antifa was a little lizard. And they groomed it, and they petted it, and they watered it, and they fed it, and it grew into a dragon. I don't really think now, just short of CQB, which is close quarters battle, that you really would be able to take back Seattle. Not with people armed the way they are. These people are armed. With this caveat, let one protester with the temper of the times today, right now, get shot, armed or not. And woe be to the person who happens to shoot an armed or unarmed black protester. You'd see this country light up again for weeks on and on and on. The only way to take Seattle back is with military force. Long gun, pitched, CQB, close quarter battle in the middle of civilian Americans. And guaranteed that would kill Trump's chance. Biden will win, and even if Seattle is subdued, if Biden wins, all of that will be given right back to Antifa. Because if you send rivers of blood down the storm drains of a major American city, guaranteed there's going to be a civil war. And it's not going to be a war of words. I mean an all-out fighting war with hundreds or perhaps thousands of Americans killed. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth the time or effort for anything leftist? Is it worth it for 6 blocks or 3 blocks in Seattle at this point? I say they want squalor and chaos. Let them eat it.
Monsieur has unlocked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Supplements Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. If you want to contact me, you can find me on my Twitter account at BZEP, at BZEP. Really active on Twitter. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and also by the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And also Pratt & Whitney Engines Thrust. You can trust. Tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team with whom I will be consorting in less than an hour. And, of course, thanks to DUANE Patterson for having been here in the first hour. Thanks to everybody listening live, everybody in Facebook chat, all the great people in the SHR Media chat. Thanks to everybody who's listening later on in podcast. I really, honest to God, appreciate everybody that's there. Traveling Cynic, Sergeant Booker, Leslie, Simone, Jack, Alaskan, and all the other folks that support and listen to me. I'll be back Thursday night with Jack Alexander. We're going to talk about CHAZ. Jack has a very opposite view to mine. Be here. God bless. Take care. Be safe.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.